I'd like to welcome singer-songwriter Katherine Priddy to the Luminaries Magazine recorded culture show this afternoon. I met Katherine. Hello, Katherine. I met you and obviously discovered your music recently at the Ventnor Fringe, of which you were one of the highlights, where you performed at St. Catherine's Church. So welcome this afternoon for our interview. How are you?
I'm not too bad, thank you. I'm quite busy, but I'm all right. How are you?
You are? Yeah, I'm good. Obviously, you know about my mum passing, but life has to go on, and journalism and magazines don't wait, and it's great to throw myself into work and creativity. So first of all, you've been on quite a journey as a singer-songwriter. I understand that you were discovered around 8 years ago. Was that because you'd already started performing, Katherine? Did you have that desire to perform from an early age?
It's a funny one, really, because when I was very young, I was always in the school plays, and I was quite a confident young thing, really. And then I hit my teenage years and I lost a lot of confidence and I got quite shy and awkward. And I actually, if you'd asked me when I was about 16 whether I'd ever become a musician, I'd have definitely said no. Even though I've always loved writing and I love music, I didn't ever really think it was what I was going to end up doing. But I've been very lucky that it's happened really organically, because I just started writing and singing my own songs in my bedroom. And then a couple of things happened. I got into this competition for young musicians that a friend entered me into, and I got to the runner-up stage for that. And then
Can I ask, when was that, Katherine? How old were you when that?
I would have been about 16. That was around my GCSEs.
So you were literally one of those singer-songwriters who was discovered from their bedroom, which has happened to a lot of people, and that's how the world has changed.
Yeah, and I think I was quite reluctant for a while, and I went to uni and I didn't do much music while I was there. I did the odd gig here or there. It wasn't really until I came back from university and moved back to Birmingham and went into the studio for the first time in about 2017 that I really kind of thought, right, I'm going to give music a solid crack here, and it's all kind of been building from there.
So, I mean, what did you think you were going to do if you weren't going to be a musician? Because you studied English literature at Sussex University, and obviously your music has been lauded for your use of classical references, your poetic tone of voice. So that English lit degree has it's probably helped you to polish your songwriting.
Definitely. I mean, I think I've always been heavily influenced by the books I've read and the poetry that I love. And I think if I hadn't done music, I would have probably stayed on at academia, and I still kind of love the idea of being a batty lecturer one day at a university and riding in on a bicycle. And
so being a singer-songwriter in a blue stocking.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what I would have done, really.
You could do that.
I suppose, but like I said, I didn't really have much expectation for the music. I was just doing it because I loved it and I thought it would be fun, and I wanted to see what happened. And I really didn't know it was going to end up becoming such a full-time thing. But obviously, I'm really, really happy that it has, because it made.
So what changed? I mean, you did your degree in English literature. What changed your mind about not carrying on with academic studies and deciding to focus on the music?
Well, I had worked really, really hard at uni for 3 years. I'm one of these people that I was in the library at 7 a.m. and then I was leaving the library at 9 p.m. and then I was going out and I was still going back into the library at 7 a.m. and I burnt myself out a bit. I'm not very good at switching off and stopping work, which is great in many ways, but
you have to be creative people. I know what that's like, especially if you're a perfectionist, and we get so interested in what we're doing. You're so passionate that you forget about time. And if you have this desire to write a piece or to compose a song, you're not going to be aware of anything else, which can be tricky with other people.
And that was it.
And have all conventional lives, because basically being an artist just doesn't stop, does it?
No.
We're always thinking about it. Ideas are always bubbling away.
Yeah, your brain never really switches off, does it? And I think basically at the end of university, I needed a break, and I knew I needed to get out of that kind of area for a little bit and just give myself a chance to just do something else and just to switch off for a bit. So I did, and but during that time I started to do the odd gig, and I've got a wonderful friend and now manager called John Fell, and during that time he was emailing me saying, you're going to come back to Birmingham at some point and just go into the studio and, you know, just have fun, just record one song and see how it feels, because he's always championed me, and I think he's always had I don't know, I think he's always thought more of my music than I did a lot of the time. I think he could see potential when I couldn't. So I did.
Important to have people like that in our lives, because often we don't see our own potential, but someone else can see it very clearly and point you in the right direction. So did you not perform any gigs at all when you were at Sussex?
I did a few. So again, I did, and I've always, for the first few years of music, I was always small, fairly big gigs, but just not very often. So I supported Martin Carthy while I was down there. He's obviously a fantastic folk legend, really, and a band called Stornoway. And I supported Vashti Bunyan as well when I was doing my A levels. So it's kind of like the odd gig here or there. Again, thanks to John for kind of helping me get those shows. But I think, and he was right, because he always said you need to go to uni, and you need to do your studying, and you need to go abroad for a bit and do all this sort of stuff and get it out your system, and then you can come back and you can focus on music. And I always thought, yeah, sure, that's what I'll do. But he was, as usual, very right. So
also, you've lived, haven't you? You've done some more living, and that's important.
It's important for writing songs.
Storytelling, for writing songs, it's very important.
Yeah, definitely. You know, and I wouldn't change anything, but I am glad that I am glad I did come back, and I am glad I went into the studio, and I'm obviously I feel very lucky that it's all panned out this way.
So you know, you've been championed by some legendary people. You know, you brought out an EP in 2018, Wolf, which Richard Thompson liked a lot and said it was the best thing he'd heard all year, which is a wonderful comment. You know, it's a big vote of confidence to have a legendary singer-songwriter say that about an up-and-coming artist. Mm-hmm. You've been played on Radcliffe and Maconie, who I absolutely love.
They're great.
Yeah, they are wonderful, and they really champion emerging artists. And you will hear things on their show that you just don't hear anywhere else. I guess carrying on the tradition of John Peel, mm-hmm. which is so important for artists. And you've won prizes at the Cambridge Folk Festival, and you've had a mentoring deal. So, you know, you've had a lot of validation and help at this point. So do you see yourself having a dual career, maybe, you know, being an academic, but also a singer-songwriter, because now life is not as black and white as it would have been for past generations, that we can have more than one thing that we do, more than one career. And does that excite you?
It does. And I think at the moment, I think with the album that's just come out, I'm very focused on music, and it's taking up a lot of my time. So it's quite hard to think about what I would do as well as. But I certainly think if there was a way, in some way, to combine my love of, you know, my music with other stuff that I'm interested in. I mean, I've always thought about going into music journalism, stuff like that, for instance, or I would love to be a radio presenter. I think that would be the best thing for me, just to be able to talk and I just think
that about the arts and
and also, you know, I'm a people person as well, and so to be able to talk to other people and whilst also being a musician, I think would be wonderful. But yeah, at the moment I'm having to just focus very much on the few months to come. Rather, I can't see the long picture at the moment, because there's just a lot.
It would be overwhelming, wouldn't it? Because so you're this autumn winter you are touring again with Richard Thompson, having toured with him in 2019. Can I ask what was that like?
It was very surreal.
What's he like to go on the road with and
he's lovely, like
collaborate with?
Yeah, I mean he's quite quiet, but
it's not very rock and roll then.
Well, he's such a sensational performer though, because he can be quite quiet off stage, and then he just knows how to capture an audience when he's so chatty and so charismatic. But I think certainly as someone who hadn't really played in that size venues before, and I'd never done that was my first kind of tour as well, because it was around Ireland, and I think it was 5 dates, and that was my first kind of string of back-to-back dates. So it was a really wonderful experience, and again a little bit overwhelming, but so exciting. And I think I learned a lot about stamina and just, I don't know, again,
being able to help to handle it mentally, because that's the tragedy of a lot of artists who become really huge, where they become a product and you're expected to perform night after night. People burn out, and I mean worse than that, they crash and burn. Which is tragic, and people turn to other props to cope. It's about approaching it in a different way, I guess, so that you can manage it, and also staying in control of your own talent. Is that important to you, Katherine, that you would never allow yourself as a female artist to be controlled by other people? Because we've seen that happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think
with really iconic people. And I'm obviously thinking of Britney Spears, which I think it's tragic for someone who has made so much money for so many people to not actually be in control of her own artistic merit.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, autonomy is really important. And again, with this recent album, this was the first time I had a record label and a guy, I had Richard Wootton on radio and Claire Horton on press, and I've got John, my manager. And it's the first time I had a team of people, which in some ways was wonderful. And in all ways it was wonderful. But for me, it was the first time I'd had to hand over the reins to other people and kind of say, okay, you guys are going to handle this. And I think I suddenly realized, having always it just being me and John all this time, how hard I found it to kind of let other people in and trust that they were doing their job, and that they're all incredible and they've done such an amazing job.
That they are representing you as you want to be represented, because the moment you step into the public arena, it's important, isn't it? You want that to be authentic.
Yeah, and I've
always true to your own values.
And it is really important to me, and I've always tried to be myself and not, when it comes to things like social media as well, I'm just myself on there, really, because
I think it's really important. People respond to authenticity. They don't respond to automated bulletins about what you're up to, whether you're a journalist or a singer-songwriter. It's really important to be honest with your audience.
Yeah, and I think as a female musician as well, one of the things I've been most hot on, and that again, like with John and the label and everything, I've been really respectful of this, is that I didn't want to fall into the trap of being this kind of floaty, flowery maiden. My music can be quite soft and quite delicate and has that style.
But it can also be very, very dark. I mean, unexpectedly dark fairy tales.
Yeah,
really. You're not the shrinking violet.
No.
Now that I've seen you perform, some of your work is sort of ghostly and ethereal, but a lot of it is very intense and dark. And
I think it's just really important to be seen as someone, as a businesswoman as well as a musician, and someone who deserves to be taken seriously. And I don't want to be pigeonholed. I do think
I was going to ask you about that. I was going to ask you about, what's happened to artists in the past. I was thinking of Bob Dylan, and he was lauded as this almost visionary folk singer when he first emerged in the late 50s and early 60s, inspired by people like Woody Guthrie. But then when he went electric, particularly when the film was made about him when he was on tour in the UK, and he was booed, and the folk purists didn't like it, that he was embracing rock and roll. But the whole point about being an artist is that you should be able to do that.
You have to change.
To explore whatever kind of music, wherever your art and ideas take you. Is that something that you feel passionate about? Because I don't see you as a as a traditional folk singer, I think music could also be used for film, for drama.
Yeah.
Do you want to explore all genres? Do you see
Definitely.
yourself in that
I've been,
way?
I'm sorry, I've been quite keen to not pigeonhole myself as a folk musician, even though the music I make can be classed as folk. I don't sing traditional songs, or if I do, I tend to, change them up.
Yeah.
And I do think there is that risk again, like I was saying, if you're a woman singing folk music, there's a real push on you sometimes to wear the long flowery dresses and to kind of fit into that trope. But for me, I don't think my music is that folky sometimes. Certainly,
No, neither do I.
quite Eurydice off the album was inspired by Radiohead. And has heavy electric guitar and bass and drums and stuff. And I think as well, going into the studio and recording, each CD and each release you do is a really nice opportunity to experiment and to do something new. And then you parcel it up, and that's that album, or that's that EP. And I think, and then every time you start a new project, that's a new chance and a blank page to kind of look at what you did before and think, okay, I'm going to change this time. And so I wouldn't want people to expect album 2 to sound exactly like this album, because then you haven't developed.
You haven't progressed, have you?
Exactly.
Tell me about Wolf. I mean, obviously I've watched the video a number of times, and I'm very curious about the subject matter.
Yeah.
Can you shed some light on that, Katherine?
Yeah, so I wrote that song.
Obviously, it's pretty dark, and there you are, smashing things up, smashing china
Yes,
at the very end with great intention.
It was great intention. It was. I wrote that song after reading Wuthering Heights, and I loved the character of Heathcliff. And there was that. He's a real character. The whole book is based around love and hate and the kind of the space
and passion, extraordinary passion,
and I think
for another human being.
Yeah, and
elements.
Reading that,
so elemental, isn't it?
It is, and reading that as a teenager was really impactful. So that's where Wolf came from. And for the music video, again, that was my first proper single. It was the title track from this first EP. It's the first proper single, and I thought, well, this is a great opportunity for me. Kind of, it's that first impression thing, isn't it? And again, it was that there's this temptation to, I could have filmed myself walking through a cornfield, playing my guitar, or through a wood, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it wouldn't have been me. So I thought, well, how can I have a bit more fun with this and bring out some of the passion and the hatred and the love at the same time? So I thought it'd be really great fun to walk through Digbeth, which is like my neck of the woods in Birmingham, and smash up some china with a baseball bat, because I knew people wouldn't be expecting it. And it was also a lot of fun.
I can imagine. I mean, it's very cathartic.
I can highly recommend it.
Smashing things, boxings like that. If you ever need to get anything out of your system, I recommend boxing.
Oh, okay, I might give that a go.
Yeah, really good, really good. So obviously there are a lot of classical references, and does that come from your time at Sussex, from studying classical literature and being interested in mythology, but then again giving it your own interpretation? Possibly,
yeah. I think actually I read a lot of Greek myths growing up. My mum always read. I've got a twin brother, and my mum always read to me and my brother when we were growing up, and she loves fairy tales and mythology, and she's got a whole bookshelf at home that's just collections of myths and legends and folk stories and fairy tales. And so I grew up reading those, and I just think they're so rich for the imagination for children.
I think they're rich for adults as well. Yeah. I mean, they just have this intensity about them that instantly transports you. And I find them as magical now as I did when I discovered them.
I agree.
As a child.
Particularly Greek myths. I loved the fact that the gods weren't perfect, and they made bad decisions, and they were jealous, and they
did terrible things. Exactly. Just like real life. It's like a soap opera.
Yeah. So when it comes to writing songs, I think, particularly Greek myths for me are a really great basis for exploring more familiar subjects, because a lot of them have moral kind of consequences and things woven into the story. And so I think, I don't know, I've just read a lot, and I think it's hard to not let that lead into what.
I mean, with Eurydice, obviously, it's a heartbreaking story, isn't it? Because Orpheus goes to retrieve his wife from the underworld, and Hades agrees to it, but he's told that they mustn't look back as they go back into the world, and he doesn't stick to the bargain.
No.
And he loses his wife.
Yeah.
So it's incredibly bittersweet. Does that appeal to you? Do you like bittersweet stories? I mean, a lot of your stories are quite dark, perhaps about unrequited situations.
I think I find it easier. I think when I'm really happy, I find it a lot harder to write. And I think a lot of musicians would say the same. I remember once having a breakup, and again, manager John being like, well, at least you're going to write some songs.
Great material. It's harder to write a really good song about just being happy ever after.
It is. But also I think for me, writing songs sometimes is a really great way for me. It's quite selfish really, but it's a good way for me to unpack stuff and to kind of, I find it very cathartic. And then when you sing these songs, it can be so personal. When I'm singing them, you have to remember that the people in the audience aren't looking at me and thinking, oh, well, this has happened to you, or you're feeling this. Because when you listen to music, you take it in and you apply it to your own circumstances and your own feelings. And that whole process I find really cathartic of singing such personal songs, but then knowing that everyone in the audience is also relating to them in whatever way they choose.
Of course, they will relate to them as individuals. But how do you feel about also sharing very personal feelings in the public arena? Because there's no doubt that the work that writers and artists and musicians do is intensely picked over by journalists.
Yeah.
Like me, I'm both a writer and a journalist. And once it's in the public arena, it's going to be dissected, and people can become more fascinated with the person behind the artistry, if that makes sense, that you become the point of interest.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? I mean, that happens obviously if you become celebrated and famous. People are always looking for meaning in songs, in writing. It's like they've got to get under the skin of the artist.
Yeah, and I don't mind that. And I've always said that I'd rather not explain the meanings of songs too deeply, because I'd rather people listen to them and
put their own stamp on them.
Yeah, but then because I think it's like a magician explaining tricks, isn't it? It's more magical if you kind of
if you don't absolutely know what the truth.
But I think as well, sometimes when you write a new song, playing it for the first time live can feel quite nerve-wracking, because, and certainly like releasing this album was so nerve-wracking because it's so personal and you pour so much time and thought, and it wasn't just the couple of years spent recording and mastering and gearing up to the release. It was the years prior to it that I'd spent writing the songs and kind of honing them. And then suddenly you're putting it out there and there's the chance that people are going to turn around and go, oh, it's rubbish. And you think, it's not like, it's writing songs and art and writing in general. It's so intense. You can't separate it.
You are making yourself vulnerable.
Yeah, and it's such a personal thing. It's not like going to a pub and serving a pint that's not very good, but then you can just brush it off. You're putting out something that's intrinsically wrapped up with you. So it's very hard not to take criticism.
Oh, good, of course. Yeah, absolutely. How long was this album in the making, The Eternal Rock Beneath? How long did it take you?
On and off, we recorded it over a period of about 2 years, I think, because I was still kind of flitting about here and there and wasn't quite sure what I was doing during that time. So we didn't just go in and record it in 1 week. It was bits and pieces, and then we had other musicians come in for a couple of days and recorded their bits, and then we couldn't meet for another month or two.
Was that interrupted by the pandemic?
No, actually, so I'd actually finished it before the pandemic hit, and it was due to be released in 2020. So that was another gutting thing about COVID. It was sitting there ready to go. I was about to sign the contract with Navigator Records, the label that it has since been released on, and then COVID happened, and I could have put it out there, and people were saying, well, why don't you just put it out there anyway? But it wouldn't be how I'd have wanted to remember releasing the album. And I think it would have felt like shouting into the void a bit during that first year, because there was just so much else going on. It wouldn't have felt right doing it then, because I wanted to give it my full focus. And when you spent that long on something, you want to give it the best chance possible, don't you?
Why rush when you've already waited so long to make your debut? I think people are often in too much of a hurry. I've been talking a lot about slowing down in order to do more.
Absolutely.
And to do our best work by not rushing things. I think that's really important for artists, not to rush. So.
And COVID presented a really good opportunity in some ways, even though at first it felt awful because I lost all my gigs and I didn't know if the album would ever be released, and that was rubbish. But it also presented a great opportunity to build my audience online, and I did live streams and took part in online festivals and did some collaborations and things. And so that then actually by the time the album was released, I actually feel like I was in a much better position. So I am glad I waited and just kept working on building the foundations for the release before it came out. It's all worked out okay in the end, luckily. Yeah.
Absolutely. And what sort of response have you had to the album? I mean, I know that Guy Garvey loved it, and you've had some very good airplay on Six Music, and Ceres Matthews has played on the singles.
Yeah, it's been better than I could have hoped for, really. Like I said, I didn't have any great expectations for it, in that I'd never released an album before and wasn't quite sure. I didn't know what to expect, really. I just hoped that people would enjoy it, and I wanted to be proud of it. And but yeah, the fact that it got to #1 in the folk charts, which was, I know it's just numbers, but just to know that
matters. That's exciting. I mean, it's a validation, isn't it?
And you're seeing my name at the top with all these other artists that I grew up listening to and that I have such huge respect for, and to know that there's that many people buying and downloading and streaming the album, it's just nuts, really. Like I never thought it would go that well, I suppose. And then
what opportunities has the album led to?
What did you say, sorry?
What opportunities have come out of the album launch and the fact that it's been so well received, Katherine?
And well, the Richard Thompson tour coming up in this October is off the back of the album. And then
where are you going to be touring this time?
With him, I'm going to be going to Birmingham Symphony Hall.
On home turf. How does that feel?
Amazing. I'm really excited about that. We've got the Barbican in York, the Royal Concert Hall in Glasgow. We're going to Perth and
some big places.
London Palladium.
London Palladium. That's exciting.
Really, really exciting. So that's all come off the back of the album. And then,
does that feel scary?
Yes, definitely.
I mean, just about everybody's played the Palladium.
That's the thing. I mean, it feels amazing, and I'm really excited about it. But then I've got my own headline tour in December off the back of the album as well, which is in London's already sold out, which is amazing, and both the Birmingham dates are sold out. And yeah, and I think but it's more that 2022 is shaping up to be quite exciting, which I can't really talk about much yet, but there's lots still to come.
That sounds really exciting. Anything else that you can mention? Anything surprising?
Except for so after the headline tour in December, I have got more stuff coming up in 2022, which I can't reveal yet. But it feels like things are heading in a really positive direction for next year as well, and there's some really exciting opportunities coming along. So I'm just hoping. I've just got to try and keep working hard now and keep up the momentum. And I suppose at some point I have to go to the studio and record album 2. So.
How do you manage the different parts of your life, and are you now able to make a living as a singer-songwriter? I wanted to talk to you about the reality of being, a female artist in 2021, because it's not easy to choose the path of a writer or artist. Many writers and artists never make really a sustainable living. It seems to be all or nothing. And I mean, you've got talent. A lot of people have talent. Do you think there's an element of luck in it as well, as to who gets taken up? Because, you know, I saw someone comment on Twitter, someone said, oh, you know, if you work hard, you become successful. That actually isn't true.
No, it's
not necessarily. You can be really talented and go uncelebrated and have that success. To an extent, it can be a bit random. Unless perhaps you have a, you know, maybe it's people who also have an entrepreneurial streak. And you talked about being a businesswoman. I as a journalist who's become an entrepreneur, and I founded my own magazine, which has been very hard. You know, I didn't think it would be so hard, having become very well known on broadsheets and national newspapers, to set up my own magazine. But it is hard, because when you're not taking finance and big companies, you've got to find a way to keep going during all the building up stages when you don't have any infrastructure.
I would say that it's definitely a mix of luck. There is little elements of luck in there, but it's then having the stamina and the attitude and the hard work to make the most of those moments, because the Richard Thompson thing in some ways felt like luck, because I never sent him an EP and I don't know how he got one, but he did. And then I guess it wasn't luck that he then really liked it. That was because...
No, that's because you're talented, Katherine. And it's okay to accept. I'm sure you probably felt uncomfortable at some times, you know, when people tell you you're really good.
Yeah.
And it can feel a little bit awkward, but why should we feel awkward about something that we've worked very hard at and that we are good at? It's okay to be gracious and say thank you and accept our own talents, because everybody has talents. It's just that they're different.
I do think that's another thing. So you have to have
there's a way of handling it with grace, I think.
Yeah, there's some element of luck. There's a lot of hard work. There's a lot of stamina. I keep using that word.
No, you're right. That's a really interesting thing, because if you don't have the stamina and the mental mindset to cope with being on the road
and rejection
and being able to also handle being in the limelight and all that goes with doing interviews with journalists, you know, being able to turn it on when required. People fail for that reason alone, because they can't handle everything that goes with being in the limelight.
And I think sometimes people see you on stage and the performing aspect of music and the album releases and stuff, but actually I'd say that's only about 10%, if that, of what it takes to, you know, because actually most of the time I'm on my laptop, I'm emailing, I'm trying to manage financial stuff, I'm trying to create graphics and run my social media and keep on top of invoicing and trying to get bookings for other gigs, and there's a lot that goes with it, and you have to be proactive,
and you've got to be able to handle those different aspects of being a one-woman band. What do you do to stay sane and to be able to focus on those areas, but while still taking care of your mental health and your well-being? What do you do to switch off? I mean, do you meditate? Because I think meditation is an amazing tool for writers and artists.
I do rock climbing, which
might I didn't expect you to say that.
No, and it might sound like the opposite of meditation, but actually I find it incredibly meditative, because you can only focus on
not falling off that rock face.
All you're focusing on is your breath and your hands and each movement, and so you can't be thinking about other stuff during that time, and so in that respect I find it quite meditative. So I do that.
Where did you last clamber up a rock face? I'd love to. Where have you been recently where you've done rock climbing?
I've just been climbing indoors in Birmingham. I haven't been able to go and climb outdoors for some time, but I used to go to a place in France quite a bit called Fontainebleau near Paris, which is amazing.
But where would you like to go if you could be out in nature?
Just the Peak District for climbing. I love the Peak District, and it's not too far from home. But yeah, so I find that a great way to switch off and relax. But also,
what else?
Writing. This is more of a practical thing, writing lists and keeping well-organized spreadsheets of what I've got to do, and like what's been.
Do you like spreadsheets?
I'm a visual person, and if I have more than one thing in my head, I could have 2 things, or I could have 100 things. It doesn't matter. I find it really overwhelming. So I have to have things written down so that I can see how much I've got to do, and I can think, right, I'll do this.
But you don't love just ticking things off the list?
Yeah, sometimes I write down things I've already done that day just so I can cross it off. Have a shower, tick.
What else do you do for the sheer, enjoyment of life that perhaps people don't know about you? What else do you love?
I think people know I go walking a lot. I've been hiking with my dad lately. We've been doing the Offa's National Trail.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, so I love being outdoors, but I've actually, during lockdown, I taught myself to knit and to crochet. So I've been doing a lot of that in evenings, and I find that really, I'm not very good at sitting and doing nothing. Otherwise my mind starts going and I start getting distracted by work again. So I find doing something with my hands like that, I find that really restful. So I've been making jumpers and blankets and stuff for the last year or so.
Right, you can make yourself something to wear on tour.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I mean, so far I've just finished, I should say this really, I've just crocheted myself a little bra top. So I'm not sure I'll be taking that on tour with Richard Thompson, but
Wow. Actually, let's talk about image, because you said, that you're not going to, you don't see yourself as this ethereal folk singer in floating dresses in a cornfield. Are you sort of at the stage where you're still experimenting with how you want to create a persona on stage? Do you know how you want to dress? Because fashion, I've worked as a fashion director, fashion editor, as a feature writer, and I'm very interested in fashion as an art form. And for artists, I mean, if you think of the great bands, the great rock bands, and also female artists who used fashion and costume. So image is important. It goes back to what we were saying, that that 10% of it is performance and your talent and all that goes in to create the album and then go on tour. But the image is important too. How do you want to dress for your stage persona? I
mean, I think for me,
and are you afraid, are you sort of at the stage where you're not quite sure where to go with that?
I think I'm fairly sure. I think obviously, sometimes I do want to wear a dress, and that's absolutely fine. I think I should be able to do that.
You can wear a dress that's very rock and roll or experimental. Or...
At the moment, I've been enjoying some more sort of power suits. I like a power suit. Certainly for my press shots and things, I like to wear a suit. And I've been wearing more androgynous clothing, I suppose. I've just purchased myself a black denim boiler suit, which I really like. But yeah, I don't know.
Is that going to land up going on tour with you? Is the boiler suit going to come out?
Probably, yeah.
I mean, which female artists do you like in terms of image as well as?
That's a very good question. The Courtney Marie Andrews has a really cool look. I don't know if you're familiar. She wears some really nice shirts.
How does she dress?
She wears some really nice shirts, and I like a shirt.
I noticed that you like a shirt. You like striped shirts.
Yeah, I do like a shirt. I think as well, it depends on what venue I'm in. Because I mean, at festivals and things, I'll happily wear dungarees and jeans and dungarees and t-shirts, but I wouldn't wear that to the Palladium. With
I mean, do you like the idea of wearing an amazing evening gown if it wasn't ethereal? If you could do it your way, which is you're a bit more of a tomboy, aren't you?
Definitely.
You're not.
I can't imagine being really glammed up ever.
I can't see you in a fairy tale ball gown.
No, I would not be.
You're going to be more Lady Gaga.
I'd rather be in the suit than the ball gown, I think, if I was doing a gig. And I don't know if that is a conscious thing of just, I feel sometimes like I'm taken more seriously when I'm dressed like that. I mean, maybe there is an element of that. And I think that'd be understandable, to be honest, but.
That's an interesting comment you've just made. I mean, I want to ask you candidly, is it tough being a woman still in the music business in the 21st century? is it still full of men telling women what to do? And how, also, I mean, I was just thinking of, Lady Gaga in the most recent version of A Star Is Born, and I've seen all the versions, and I love the one that she was in with Bradley Cooper. And I mean, it makes a really serious point that she was an incredibly talented singer with a raw talent and voice, and then it was completely ruined by a manager who made her sound like everybody else.
Yeah.
And that is a comment about the music industry, about the factories that exist that try and turn people into homogenized commodities.
Yeah.
Who lose the very thing that made them exciting.
I think we're quite lucky in the industry I'm in the kind of folky sphere, is that there is a bit less of that churning out kind of pop stars.
Homogenized pop songs.
Yeah.
But I definitely, like the last one.
Yeah, but I definitely think as a woman, you do have to work harder to be taken seriously, and you still get comments. Like, I still regularly get comments where I think it can be quite image based, and I don't really want
that it's all about appearance and image and less about your actual talent.
Yeah, and you still get the odd sexist comment. I actually had one really recently backstage at a festival where I mentioned that my guitar could be a bit temperamental, because it's quite low end and quite boomy, so I tend to get quite a bit of feedback. So I mentioned to the sound guy that my guitar could be a bit temperamental, and he said, all the female guitars always are. And I thought, oh. And it's like, I know he was joking, but when you get that sort of comment regularly, and there's been other times where I have felt patronized, and I've been made to feel quite uncomfortable. I've been kind of cuddled, and
I've been there.
I always just think,
I'm actually writing about it at the moment.
The one thing I would always say, because you also get guys, and I get it, that they're thinking, well, how, they're nervous that anything they say now might be misconstrued, or that's the thing. I always say the basic.
Don't say it.
I always say, if you wouldn't say it to a male musician, or you wouldn't do it to a male musician, don't do it to me, because I don't want to feel like I'm anything other than a musician. I don't really want to feel like a female musician. I'm just a musician.
Yeah, you're an artist.
Yeah.
It's not okay. I do think we have to stand up now for that kind of.
Yeah, and you still see on the festival lineups now, they can be quite a disappointing. I know this year was tricky because we couldn't bring in artists from outside the UK because of COVID and stuff, but I still don't think there's much excuse to not be getting more women higher up on the bills now. And if it's because you think you can't find a woman that you think is big enough to fill that slot, give someone a chance, because otherwise they're never going to be able to make their way up to those slots either. I don't know. Things have improved, but there's still a way to go, I think, and only takes a few conversations with other female musicians to realize that we've all had very similar disappointing experiences every now and then. So
I'm not surprised. I mean, they still go on, unfortunately. I'd like to talk a little bit about growing up in Birmingham. I actually have a lot of family in Birmingham. My favourite aunt lived in Selly Oak.
Oh yeah.
She passed away. I have very happy memories of going to Birmingham and how much fun we had, and going into the Bullring shopping centre, which as a child seemed quite magical at the time. What does it mean to you to be a Brummie? What does that immediately conjure up for you, and how has that also made its way into your music?
I think I'm very proud of Birmingham. So I was born in Birmingham, and then I grew up in Alvechurch, which was a village just south of Birmingham, and I live back in Birmingham again now. And I love Birmingham, and I'm very proud of the city. And I think it gets quite a bad rep sometimes. And normally,
I think that's because people think that it's an industrial.
And it is.
What's wrong with that? I mean, it's actually got a really interesting history. Like, it was a very important centre for jewellery making.
It's a hub, yeah. So we've got the jewellery quarter. You've got Digbeth with all the old factories, and I don't mind the industrial bits, and I don't think that has to be a bad thing just because.
Of course not. I mean, it's basically that was so important in the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, exactly.
It made money for this country.
And I think as well, you know, normally if you say you're from Birmingham, people will immediately imitate the accent and then go, oh, I don't like Birmingham. And then you say, oh,
Have
where
you
have you
been
visited?
there?
So where have you visited? And they said, oh, I've just been through on the train station, or we've gone on the ring road. And you think, well, you know, that there's a lot to it. And it's got a fantastic music scene. It's got a really good folk scene in Birmingham as well. It's just
where do you like to play, or where have you played in Birmingham then? Where would you recommend going to listen to live music?
So right around the corner from me, there's the Kitchen Garden Cafe, which is it's very small and very sweet, but it gets proper like world class, not just folk music, but they do get a lot of fantastic folk musicians there. So growing up, that's often where I used to go and watch music. And then just over the road from that, you got the Hare and Hounds, which is more for like big band nights and stuff, and it's also a great pub. And of course we've got the Town Hall and Symphony Hall for the bigger gigs, which is just stunning venues, like really world-class venues. So there's a lot going for Birmingham, and I love how multicultural it is as well, and just it's a proper little melting pot.
So what about the food? Where do you like to go and hang out in Birmingham in
got the
terms
Baltic
of
Triangle.
food?
If you want curry, you need to come to Birmingham because we've got the best Balties for sure. Aside from that, again, actually, around where I am in King's Heath, there's some really nice little independent cafes and restaurants and stuff. There's something for everyone, and I think outside of obviously around the Boring and everything, you've got a lot going on around there. But in some of I don't sometimes see Birmingham as a city. It's more like a little collection of different neighbourhoods, and the neighbourhoods can be very, very different from each other, and each one has a very distinct kind of little flavour. And I'm in King's Heath, Moseley, Selly Oak, Sturchley. It's got a real
all villages.
Yeah, that's how
around Birmingham.
Yeah, so I'd always suggest if you don't think you like Birmingham, try a different little area, or chat to someone who lives here, I suppose.
And really, it's a collection of villages around the hub of Birmingham, which that's what people don't realise. Like London. London is a collection of villages.
Yeah, but there'll be parts of places in London you wouldn't want to walk through on your own at night.
Absolutely.
And there is in every city, but there's also some really lovely parts and so many great like independent pubs and restaurants and venues and stuff. So I also love the canal. I think we're really lucky to have the canal because that's always nice to walk along.
And I do remember the canal. Yeah, the canal.
You're never far from a canal.
And they're wonderful places. Again, they tend to be really tranquil.
Yeah.
And places to disappear to.
And if you get just outside Birmingham, that's kind of where Alchurch, where I grew up, and walk along the countryside around Birmingham and Worcestershire and places along the canal, is just stunning. It's so green, and there's so much green surrounding Birmingham in Worcestershire and Warwickshire and around there. So yeah, big advocate for the Midlands.
What about other artists that you listen to? Do you listen to a lot of music apart from recording and playing your own? Who do you listen to, Katherine? Who are you excited about?
All sorts, to be honest. I think people often might suspect that I just sit and listen to folk music, but I've actually got a big...
I doubt it.
I really like 80s rock and sleaze rock and all of that side. I listen to a lot of classic rock, but...
For instance?
Pardon?
Give me some names to conjure with.
I mean, Motley Crue would be an obvious one. I wouldn't say there's much of their influence in my work.
But you never know.
Never know. But
so you wouldn't say no to jamming with Motley Crue? That would be interesting.
That would be very interesting. But there is a band that I have been listening to quite a bit lately called Alt J, who I really like. They've got really clever production. They really layer stuff up in a way that I really like, and he often uses his vocals almost like another form of percussion, and it's really interesting lyrics, and so I like all that sort of stuff. I like interesting music. Another band called
I mean, do you like the great iconic rock bands of the 60s and 70s like Led Zeppelin? Because I think what they was doing was, it was like opera.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was just on an epic scale, and in a way, it was very intellectual. But the lyrics, again, often had references to classical mythology, that it was all about the storytelling.
Well, that's it. And I think that's the key thing for me personally when I listen to music. I listen to lyrics a lot. That tends to be what I focus in on most. Um, and I think as long as songs have got something interesting going on in terms of their lyrics, or like I said, I like the way things can be layered up. Again, Radiohead are really, they write such clever songs. I think as long as it's
Well,
doing
that's what we respond to, isn't it? We love the music, but we respond to songs that resonate with us because of the message.
Yeah, I think it's really, I think if you're writing music, it's just important to just listen to as much as you can from all different genres. And so I often listen to sick music while I'm working and stuff, and you hear something that you wouldn't have thought you might like, and then it grows on you. And I think it's just the more you can listen to the more different genres, the better, really. Just give yourself a well-rounded appreciation of things. And even if you don't like something massively, there might be one element of it that you think, oh, but that what they did there was really interesting, and you can take that and work on that. So just variety, I think it's important.
Can you see yourself playing an electric guitar?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. I
mean, and playing do you play other instruments?
I'm actually trying to learn bass guitar at the moment, but I'm struggling. I've got quite small hands, and I'm struggling to to span it sometimes. But yeah, definitely. Like I said, going into the studio for this album was a really exciting opportunity to experiment with building up the sound and getting a bigger sound on some of the tracks that when I frequently play acoustic when I play live. And so I think the next thing for me is actually to try and build up more of a band around me for my live shows, and to try and kind of expand my sound in that way. And yeah, I'm excited for album 2 because I don't really know what I'm going to do yet. I'm just going to go and
have you got any tracks already bubbling away?
I've got lots of songs written. Now I'm just looking forward to going into the studio and kind of just starting to experiment with how I'm going to record it and what other instruments I might like on there. But yeah, so
I was just thinking of, I love the Faces, and I've listened to a lot of really early Rod Stewart and the Faces. I mean, I love music. I absolutely love music. I was given a lot of albums from the 60s and 70s, and that's definitely how I like to escape. And a lot of their music, well, it was influenced by folk, by the blues. If you listen to really, really early Rod Stewart when he was playing with the Faces, it's extraordinary. It's nothing like nothing like he's playing now, but you should listen to it.
I will. I'll do it.
It's really, really lyrical. And it's like folk rock.
Okay, I'll give that a go.
And the one thing I wanted to ask you is about the romance of being an artist, because when you came to Ventnor, and I was thinking about you traveling from Birmingham, although we live in the 21st century and so much has changed in many ways, your life as an artist hasn't changed from Dylan's day. You still have to travel from A to B because you're a one-woman band. I mean, if you're going on tour with an artist like Richard Thompson, I imagine there's a tour bus, but a lot of it is just you and your guitar, isn't it?
I still
that hasn't changed, which is, I think that's exciting, because in order to see more original music, it needs to be raw. It needs to come up from the street, from culture, to not be homogenized, if that makes sense. That it's so important to see the ideas that come out of where we are now, but not in a way that's overly managed or manufactured in order to be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like I've always, I can drive, but I haven't got a car because I can't really afford one at the moment, and there's not much need for me to have one. So yeah, I do rely on trains,
buses and trains. And do you like that? Is there a sense that appeals to you, to be the freewheeling artist?
There is.
Of course, there are going to be bad sides, the annoying bits when the train is late.
The annoying bits.
Journey doesn't go smoothly.
Carrying all the merch and the guitars and stuff can be.
That's not fun.
That's not fun. But I don't mind the actual journeys, and I do think one of the best bits about being a musician, probably one of the bits I miss most during COVID, is it is fun getting to go to all these different places and having these little whistle stop tours of new cities, and it's an excuse to go away, because and you don't get to do that with a 9 to 5. I don't go to the same office every day. I'm going to different places, and that's the best bit. that's the reward for all the admin, is getting to go to these places. And I had a great time in Ventnor because obviously I went there alone. It was a really long journey and I was staying in my little hotel, but I met a really nice couple in the bar before the gig, who I then went for a drink with afterwards, and we ended up having a few drinks, and it was really fun, and it was nice to meet people and nice to do all that. And so, yeah, I don't know,
it just stuck in my mind. I listened to, you should listen to it. They're on BBC Sounds for Bob Dylan's 80th. They had the original tapes of him literally talking back in the 60s of what his life was like. Yeah. It's incredible. And he's saying, I played the coffee houses in New York for $1 and a cheeseburger. Yeah. Of course, that was a pittance, but he made the point that he did it not to make money, but because he felt compelled to make music. Do you feel that same compulsion to make music? Of course, you've got to live.
Yeah.
But you've chosen not to do a 9-to-5 job. And I think the life of an artist is different, that there is that element that we can't help ourselves.
If I could help myself, I mean, it'd be wonderful to have a solid job, a solid
and blue stocking in a university. And
and I'd love to be able to afford to get myself a house and settle down and all those sorts of things. And there's times when I'm 26 and my friends around me are beginning to settle down and get their first houses and get married and do all this sort of thing. And of course, there's part of me that thinks, oh, it'd be wonderful to be able to do that. But also then there's times, particularly over the last year, where we haven't been gigging, where I've sat there and thought, God, why am I doing this? Or why have I chosen so much instability? But then you do gigs and you think, oh, no, this is why I do it. Because it's such a rush. And I don't know what, I think even if I stopped now and got a job, I'd still want to perform and I'd still want to go and gig. But on the subjects of, I don't think I'm having to be more like stand my ground now when it comes to fees and making sure that I am being paid properly for this, because I think I've made that decision now that I'm going to try and turn this into a living. So I can't just perform for a cheeseburger and a beer now. I'm trying to be more kind of.
Listen, you're number one in the folk chart. So I think that's absolutely fair enough, Katherine Priddy, don't you? That you are talented and good enough to be making a living, and you don't have to feel awkward about that.
Yeah, I think like my one main bit of advice for any other, particularly young women looking to get into music, but for anyone really, and I know it's really cliche, but you have to know your own worth, because you'll constantly have people who try to underpay you or
undercut you,
and you have to know your worth. You have to know how and when to say no, and be confident in that. Know what's.
There's that wonderful scene in Rocket Man. Have you seen it?
With
the dodgy manager in Denmark Street. You've got to watch it, Katherine, where Elton and Bernie Taupin, they're offered an absolute pittance in the beginning. And that's how it often is in the arts and in music. But we have to stand up and say, no, this is what I'm worth. But the thing is, we can do more of it ourselves now. Mm-hmm. It's like me founding my own magazine and instead of working for a newspaper baron. Mm-hmm. It is difficult in the beginning and scary, but also the internet makes it possible to stream and to be more in charge of your own talent.
No, I agree.
Yeah, it's been really, really lovely talking to you,
and you,
Katherine. Really enjoyed it. Do you want to just mention the concerts coming up? Are there still tickets?
Yes.
So you're going on tour with Richard Thompson. When does the tour begin, Katherine?
Richard Thompson's tour starts end of October and ends just at the start of November. I then got some dates with Sam Kelly and the Lost Boys, who are a great band from Norfolk and really great friends of mine. And that's again the beginning of November. And then my headline tour starts in early December, runs through to the 16th. And tickets are running low, actually. Tickets have sold out in London and Birmingham, and they've almost sold out in Brighton and Trowbridge as well. But
so anyone who hasn't bought their tickets, can they get all the information on your website?
Yeah, katherinepriddy.co.uk, and that's where you can also find out about where to get the album, and just there's a mailing list on there as well, which is the best way to stay in touch with me. So
yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Katherine.